Hi everybody, I'm Lauren Sini. I'm one of the analysts at Index Data, and I am here to introduce you to this amazing panel of museum librarians that will be speaking about how they have been empowered through their migrations to Folio. First up, we will have Dan Lipcan, the Anne G. Pingree Director of the Phillips Library at the Peabody Essex Museum. He will be followed by Corey Newbolls, the Special Collections Cataloging and Metadata Librarian at the Winterthur Museum Garden and Library. And we will wrap up with Natalie Kozar, Cataloging and Systems Librarian at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. We have planned for a time at the conclusion of all three speakers for questions, so we ask that you please hold questions until the end, and I will be monitoring the chat for them as well. Without further ado, I will hand the microphone over to Dan.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Lauren. And I did learn in a session earlier, Control-Alt-Shift-H. Hey, it works, right? It kind of disappears all the floating meeting controls in Zoom. So I did learn something at this conference. So I'm Dan Lipcan. I'm the Anne C. Pingree Director of the Phillips Library at the Peabody Essex Museum. The Peabody Essex Museum is located in Salem, Massachusetts, about a 30-minute drive north of Boston. And Salem is known for the witch trials crisis that happened there in 1692, for our early maritime history and success, for the annual Halloween celebrations, commonly known in Salem as Septober because it's now creeping into early September, and our connections to kind of high quality American literature, particularly the 19th century. The Peabody Essex Museum was founded in 1799 as the East India Marine Society, and a component of our original act of incorporation was a room, an adjoining room, to deposit the books, papers, and charts. So we've been around as a library within a museum since 1799. And our origins are as the kind of a maritime library because these were ship captains and sea merchants that were the founding members of the East India Marine Society. And what is now PEM has a complex family tree with many ancestor institutions, name changes, and mergers over time. And we are now the oldest continually operating museum in the United States. So we have quite a history here. And in addition to being a library and a research center, we participate very extensively in the museum's exhibition program. So we have our own gallery in the museum. One example of an exhibition there that you see on the right, that's a space that I'm in charge of curating. But the curators really mine the library quite extensively for rare and unique materials for display in the galleries. So one example of that is a recent Chinese photography show we had on at the museum. And until 2012, the library was housed in these historic buildings, 19th century buildings right across the street from the museum. But they didn't really have climate control or great fire suppression or much space to store materials. So in 2018, we moved up to this facility. It's a 120,000 square foot warehouse. It's in a town called Rowley, Massachusetts, which is an additional 15 miles north of Salem. And in addition to the library and one storage view of our storage room that you see here, our reading room is there, but art object storage is there, as well as conservation, exhibition prep rooms, the rooms devoted to the study of objects, as well as photography and digitization facilities. It was originally a toy distribution facility, so a big warehouse. And I do invite you to come visit if you're ever in the area. I'd love to show you the building. It's actually pretty fascinating and always changing. As far as our collections are concerned, we've got somewhere in the area of 350 to 400,000 printed volumes, tens of thousands of maps, broadsides, pieces of ephemera. Our collecting scope is nearly encyclopedic. We cover everything from maritime to China, Asia, Japan, very strong Native American and indigenous collections, early American history and decorative arts, all sorts of stuff. And as you might have guessed from the previous picture of library storage, we've been around for 225 years, but our predecessors were doing a lot of collecting over those 225 years and less cataloging and processing. So we do have sizable backlogs that we are working our way through. Our archival collections are really, really extensive, and this is the draw for a lot of our visiting researchers. We have well over a mile of linear shelf space devoted to storage of archival materials, manuscripts and boxes, handwritten ledgers and account books, that sort of thing. So millions of pieces of paper, unique documents. We're approaching 900 finding aids for our archival collections. We've got somewhere in the area, we think, of 750,000 photographs. A lot of those are boats. And like the print collections, we have very sizable backlogs of collections that have not yet been processed. This is just one other view of storage that I showed you before, and just to give you a sense, kind of in the upper right there, we've got some archival materials, and then our archives and manuscripts kind of fill the screen in that kind of large lower left corner and foreground of this image. So quite a lot of stuff to manage. This is a shot of our reading room, not of our typical day hosting researchers, but of an event that we have there occasionally, kind of a show and tell. We are open to anyone and everyone by appointment. We are a closed stack library, and that's part of where the closed comes from and the title of the talk. But we are willing to bring out anything and everything that people want to see from our collections. And probably 80% of what we serve up in the reading room is from our manuscripts and archives collections. You know, as I said, that's the draw. People want to come for the unique and the original and rare things. So when we started thinking about migrating to FOLIO, we were on a Voyager system, and the archival collections data was a really important piece of that for us because it is so central to the services that we provide. So we thought a lot about that in the migration. As far as circulation is concerned, we've used Aeon until we implemented FOLIO. That was put in place right before I arrived in early 2019. And as you may or may not know, whether or not you use Aeon, it does kind of create this separate and somewhat parallel database to the library catalog. You know, usage isn't tied to specific instances or items, making collection usage evaluation pretty tricky, which is something I didn't love. And there's no reflection of the status of a given item in the public catalog, except in the senses that if we had to circulate something down to Salem to curatorial or for exhibition, we would kind of do a secondary circulation in Voyager to make so that the public catalog would show that something was checked out. So some duplicate work, some parallel systems there, and I was interested in moving away from that. And you know, we circulate to 2 locations, so we actually have a very, very simple system. We circulate internally to the reading room for visiting researchers, you know, one-day loans, and a year-long loans to library staff who are welcome to keep things in their offices. And then we also circulate to curatorial and exhibitions down in Salem, and our initial loan period is 2 years for those items. You know, projects and research does take a long time, and we do have things that have been checked out for 35 or 40 years. But this means that we can get away with 2 service points and very, very simple circulation rules. You know, we don't charge fines or any of that kind of stuff. So I acknowledge that we have a very, very fortunate situation in circulation. One of the things that we ran across is that we had 35,000 items without barcodes, which are, of course, required to circulate in FOLIO. And so we loaded fake ones with the temp prefix so we could easily identify them and easily pull them together later for cleanup. And I guess I'll also note here that when I say we did this and we did that, it was really index data that did all this work. And you know, I'm really grateful to Tara and the whole crew for their work on our implementations. And I'll talk a little bit more about how well that went. Our archival collections had bib records in Voyager, so we use archive space for our finding aids, and then there was a kind of a related bibliographic record created in Voyager, and the holdings had a link to the finding aid, but no attached items. So we would kind of link people over to the finding aid. The requesting would happen in finding aid through Aon and the open URL protocol that they used. And so if we wanted to circulate in Folio, that would mean that we'd need to create item records for archival collections as well. And so, we want users to place requests. We want to have those tied into the system. And so we needed to create the items and the barcodes. And this was a workflow change for the library staff. We had previously been circulating at the folder level, but we actually shifted to circulating at the box level, which has turned out to be quite a bit easier for us as a staff. The item record creation was generated based on the top container element in the EAD records of our finding aid. We did experiment with the ASpace API and with pulling via the OAI PMH harvester in ASpace. But in the end, it was a combination of data import and bulk edit that was used to both load records, create the item records, and create the barcodes. So bib records and instance records had been created in Folio from Voyager. So when we loaded the ASpace records, we matched on title because that was kind of the least evil of the match points. That did mean that about 18 to 20% of the records we had to clean up because there were inconsistencies between the two records. Another instance of it's not so great to maintain collection data in two places because that's what happens. An ASpace record gets updated, but not the Voyager record and so forth. But that was relatively easy to clean up. And so we also wanted future us to be able to disambiguate the new barcodes for the new box records for archival collections from the temp records that we used for item records. And I know a few of you heard me talking quite a bit about tacos before the session started, but we created a different kind of fake barcode with the taco prefix, created around 900 or 1,000 item records that have been batch created. And both these and the temp records have a note that says they were created during migration. Our finding aids do remain in archive space, so we are still kicking people over to kind of look at the structure of the archival collection and how it's organized, but requests are being made through Folio and through Viewfind. I'll use this opportunity to say that I'd love to see kind of Folio native archival data structures. I know that's very complicated and easy to say. But I know there was a special collections and archives special interest group at one point, and if that ever does get revived, I think we'd be pleased to contribute, participate in whatever ways that we can to help move that work forward if that's of interest to the community. Alternatively, if you do have ideas about other solutions, certainly all ears. So, as with any migration, occasionally it feels like this, but big thanks to Index Data for making this process so smooth and the implementation so smooth. I think there was a greater impact on the library staff who had to figure out how to do the things they used to do than on our users. And in fact, our users offered only compliments. I heard no complaints, and I have wondered, sometimes I wonder if anybody actually noticed, because we literally heard so little, and it was a real non-event, which I think I'm kind of proud of, and I think that's kind of what you want out of a project like this, is to not really, for it not to be controversial at all. So we celebrated with a helium-filled taco balloon, which we went live in the beginning of February. It is only now giving up the ghost. So I think at the end of September, it's going to be time to go. But I also want to offer thanks to the Philadelphia Museum and their former director for putting us in touch with Index Data and Folio. And, we've tried to pay that recommendation forward in turn by talking with folks at the Grolier Club and the American Antiquarian Society and talking about our very positive experience with Index Data. And of course, big thanks to all of you that are here for supporting and developing Folio. We're a small staff. We are somewhat lacking in technical skill. So we're deeply grateful and reliant on the creativity and dedication of this community to move this product forward. So I'm very, very thankful for everyone's work on it. I'm really glad to see museum colleagues moving in this direction, and I'll hand the mic off to Corey at this point. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dan. That was really, really cool. It's always so cool to see other special collections library spaces and hear about your workflows, and to hear about other special collections libraries that are using Folio. Okay, welcome to my part of the panel. Thank you for joining us here today. I'm Corey Newbolz, and I'm Special Collections Cataloging and Metadata Librarian at Winterthur Museum, Garden, and Library. And today I just want to share with you how I'm using Folio and MetaDB to make my cataloging better here at Winterthur on a day-to-day basis, kind of how I'm just using it in my daily workflows. And the title of my portion is Metadata Morphoses, because through the migration and through learning Folio and how I can use it to transform our legacy records, transformation has kind of become the overarching theme. Yeah, so not only transforming our records, but also the way we work with them. Taking the good metadata and the good practices we already have and metamorphosing them into something more beautiful and more useful. Next slide, please. Okay, a little bit of context, a little bit about Winterthur. So we are both an independent research library, Winterthur Library, but we're also a key part of Winterthur Museum, Garden, and Library. The museum is a key premier museum in Americana, American decorative arts, and antiques, founded on the collection of Henry Francis DuPont. And we're also home to 2 master's programs in partnership with the University of Delaware, the Winterthur program in American Material Culture and the Winterthur UD program in Art Conservation. And the library is an essential resource and support to both of those programs. So we're really at the heart of the entire institution's mission of education, research, and discovery. Next slide, please. And a little bit more about the library specifically. The museum was established in 1951 by bequest by DuPont, and then the library followed 1 year later in 52 to support research, to support the students in the master's programs, their work and research, and also to support study of decorative arts, material culture, Americana generally. Our collections comprise rare books and manuscripts, ephemera, works of art on paper, photographs, Winterthur institutional archives, and much more. Our collections have only grown richer and more diverse since our initial founding in 1952. And today we house over 1 million items, including close to 90,000 rare books and 800,000 items of manuscript and visual material. The character of the collections, we are especially strong in distinctive genres and unique formats, like account books, rare trade catalogs, diaries, design books. We have a lot of material related to textiles, including swatch and sample books, lots of rare paper ephemera, scrapbooks, collage albums, and much more. And we're really a hub for research for people doing all kinds of different interdisciplinary work. Mostly we draw scholars working in history, art history, and branches of kind of material culture studies where those broader disciplines intersect. Next slide, please. Okay, so to set the scene a little more, I'll tell you a little bit about cataloging at Winter Tour. So we migrated to Folio. We completed the migration in February 2025, and the entire process of migrating was such a unique opportunity to learn more about our legacy metadata, its strengths, its weaknesses, what our former practices were, as well as to kind of leverage Folio and MetaDB to make our current practices better. So kind of the goals that I have set for us as special collections cataloger are to bridge legacy with present practice, repair errors and inconsistencies in our legacy data, to standardize kind of our descriptive practices across records, to localize, to add more local context, notes, and headings where appropriate, and to enrich our records with detail, especially for our rare and special collections items. And this is where Folio and MetaDB come in. They've been enormously useful and have really just, changed the way I work so much. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. Ready for the next one? So how Folio and MetaDB empower data transformation. First, looking at things from kind of like the broader view, MetaDB allows you to kind of delve into the catalog from multiple dimensions. You can combine, you can do sort of combinatory SQL querying, multiple fields, the content of an entire MARC record, or you can go very micro and just look for like a particular field or subfield. So you can really winnow down like what you're looking for that is in need of repair, and then create a data set, an organized, neat, tidy data set that gives you sort of a framework for approaching fixes. And then from the Folio side, it is extremely easy to move records in and out of Folio. You can search inventory for records, create a data set from those, which is automatically converted to CSV, and then you can move that very easily out of Folio into a bibliographic utility like MarcEdit or OpenRefine. Make your changes and then import very easily back into Folio with field matching. So it works wonderfully. It's very efficient and precise. And both of these tools together, I think what is most powerful about cataloging in Folio versus ILS that I've used, I feel like I have so much more agency. And even though I'm the only cataloger working with special collections, I'm able to like leverage these tools at scale. As many records in the catalog as I need to take a closer look at, or as few. So it's been enormously useful and revelatory in those aspects. See, I think I'm ready for the next slide, please. So now I just want to take a look at a couple use cases. These are really fairly simple practical applications of Folio and MetaDB, but in both cases, the cataloging has been vastly elevated, I would say, and I'll just refer to these as rare refinements. So we're starting with a decent legacy MARC record in both cases, and the cataloging has added local context, that rich detail, and then best practices in description. And through this process of refinement, we're transforming what may be a sturdy but minimal record into something more meaningful that has connections to other objects in the collection, that's contextualized as a Winter Tour object as part of Winter Tour's collections, and that just gives you a more robust window into what the book or the object actually is. Next slide, please. Okay, so my first use case, I'm very fond of this one because I feel like the collection it treats is very uniquely Winter Tour. the Maxine Maxim Waldron collection of paper dolls, games, and paper toys. There's a lot of ephemera in it, a lot of print objects that are not books, but that are interesting print artifacts. And the story of the collection itself is really a story about Waldron and her intellectual, aesthetic, and creative passions. So there's so much of her in it. And I really love this collection. So it makes a great example case, I think, for this talk. So over her long life, she assembled a vast collection of paper dolls and toys, games, colorful ephemera, children's books, and more, spanning the 17th to 20th centuries. And she bequeathed her entire collection except for her dolls, which went to the Chester County Historical Society in parts over the course of the years 1973 to 1981. So it was a very large bequest. With a lot of materials to describe, keep track of, trace. Next slide, please. Yeah, and I feel like this is a known collection at Winter Tour, but when we speak of it in the library, I think popularly it's kind of understood to just be the manuscript collections. And the books, although it was a large bequest of approximately 850 titles, I feel like they're a little lesser known, or they're almost considered apart from the manuscript materials. They contain a lot of like really important, beautifully illustrated works, though. So they're important in their own right. And what I wanted to do was kind of reunite them, if not physically, intellectually, with the other materials. So yeah, here is a little snapshot of a search I did in inventory. 113 records returned, and these all have a personal name tracing for Waldron as former owner. So 113. And then let's take a look at the next slide. I then searched instance notes in inventory for Waldron gift recorded in the 541 acquisitions field, and I found 739. So the larger portion, there's really not any kind of intellectual control that is linking these to Waldron in a way that is accessible to users, or even maybe to staff if they didn't search instance notes or know how the provenance was recorded in the 541. So what I wanted to do was kind of restore the connection between all these materials and establish consistent tracing practices. So let's take a look at the next slide. And this connection was so simple to restore in FOLIO. These titles are perfect candidates for quick and easy bulk transformation. I was basically, just have to save instance UUIDs, save as a CSV. You can open that in MarcEdit and then add whatever your records are in need of. So I added a 561 former owner note for Waldron, a 590 kind of alerting users to the presence of the related materials in the manuscript collection, a 700 personal name tracing with subfield E, collector and former owner terms, and then finally an 856 link to the finding aid. And very easy to do. So, next slide, please. Okay, so here is an example of one of the updated records. This record is for Flora's Feast by Walter Crane, one of the greatest children's book illustrators of the 19th century. And you can see that this record is a little bit fleshed out. You can see some of the additions that have been made. And yeah, it was really simple to do. And her book collection proffers so many treasures that it was really kind of essential to restore this dimension of her work and life as a collector. So now every book in the Waldron gift is connected to her larger remarkable legacy, with the added important benefit for access that searching her name as a subject is a great way to discover a voluminous collection of some really important works in children's literature and illustrated books. So that's our rare use case 1, and let's take a look at the next slide for the second. So my second rare use case also concerns illustration, or rather an important printing method used in book illustration, which dates back to the mid-17th century. That would be aquatint. This is a tonal printmaking technique, and it uses resin sprinkled over the printing plate to block out acid at a very granular level. So you get an overall more subtly tonal ground in the print. I started out, for this one, I started in MetaDB, winnowing down and exporting a data set of records with any mention of aquatint. And you can see an example of my querying. This is one of my early essays at querying, and it's quite complex looking. But Lauren at Index Data works with us at Winter Tour, and she's shown me a much simpler, more elegant way to do this. So my queries are improving, but this did return a data set, and then we can see that in the next slide. So here we go. I think it was, 79 records total. I queried the entire content of the record for any mention of aquatint at all. So, and then let's take a look at the next slide. A good portion of them, as you would probably expect, are in rare and include actual aquatint specimens, including some really beautiful tinted and hand-colored examples. And among them happen to be a favorite work of my own, John Heaviside Clark's 1824 Practical Illustration of Gilpin's Day. So this book, the original aquatints were printed after sketches by the English artist William Gilpin, illustrating picturesque landscape scenes at different times of day, sunrise, noon, sunset, twilight, and the original aquatints were published in 1810. And then in 1811, Heaviside Clark published in the form of a drawing manual, the same prints, but with added hand-applied watercolor. And the intention was to instruct the reader in how to apply watercolor in evocative ways to landscapes. So although it's ostensibly a watercolor painting manual, you can kind of track the stylistic changes from the late 18th century picturesque to the early 19th century romantic in the dramatic touches that Clark adds with his coloring with the watercolor. So it's an interesting specimen of like stylistic evolution too. Winter Tour has the 1824 edition with new title page, and let's take a look at the next slide. I think I may have left a slide out. I had a screenshot of the initial record, which was adequate. It was definitely decent, but it didn't, it wasn't really a rare books cataloging kind of record. It didn't elaborate quite as much detail. So here are some excerpts of the catalog record after recataloging. There's a lot to say about this book, and almost every element of the record has been enriched in proportion. Definitely a lot more nuanced subject analysis. I added a number of headings, not only for what the book is, but what it speaks to as far as art historical developments. Also, we have some headings speaking to physical evidence, physical bibliographical evidence, like binding, bookseller's label. Added some references from the bibliographical literature. A summary note, kind of elaborating its importance historically. Elaborated the special character of the illustrations in the physical description, and then a provenance and a binding note. So yeah, this record, I think, reflects a little more completely the charm and significance of this book, not just as a drawing manual, but as a window into kind of those art historical developments that I mentioned earlier, romantic landscape, English aquatint, and hand-colored prints. I will also issue the caveat that not every record turned up in MetaDB will necessarily merit this kind of recataloging, and nor would it be sound practice to recatalog everything. I think that's sort of the other side of the coin with being able to take such a multi-dimensional look at our records. Yeah, we can see what we have and make equally informed decisions about what we don't need to repair. And I think there's kind of reassurance in that, being able to feel like you have a very holistic view of the cataloging, and then being able to make informed decisions about what to fix and what you don't need to fix. Yeah, and that, I think it lends balance to some of our prioritizing as catalogers. Next slide, please. So I hope this has given you some insight into the daily practical value of FOLIO from the perspective of a special collections cataloger. As I said, it's not only the metadata that we're able to transform. FOLIO and MetaDB have also transformed how I work. I can be much more proactive in affecting the changes I want to see in our cataloging because I have tools to do so efficiently and precisely. Another thing I love about FOLIO is how it is standard agnostic. So it supports adaptability as the way we work continues to evolve and as it will continue to metamorphose into the future. And as our researchers and users likewise begin to work in new ways. And one final slide. Yeah, thank you very much for your time today, your attention. Please come visit us at Winterthur Library. You can visit our catalog or our digital collection site. Please reach out to me with your thoughts. I would be happy to hear from you. Would love to talk more about anything covered in the panel today or anything else FOLIO and MetaDB related. And with that, I will hand it over to my Philadelphia Art Museum colleague, Natalie Koziar. And thank you again.
Thanks, Corey and Dan. I always love being able to hear what my colleagues at other museum libraries are doing. So yeah, it's just very exciting. So I'm Natalie Kozar, the Cataloging and Systems Librarian at the Library and Archives at the Philadelphia Art Museum. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I look forward to sharing our FOLIO migration and post-migration story and offering some insights as to how this migration to a new library services platform has invigorated interest in future metadata remediation projects and systems configurations, and empowered both our patron base as well as the technical services library staff. Next slide, please. So to start off and give a little bit of background on the museum, this is one of the main reading rooms in our library. The library was founded alongside the museum in 1876, and the library's collection focuses and reflects the museum's collections. So that is a large focus on European, American, Asian, furniture and decorative arts, arms and armor, costumes and textiles, prints, drawings, photographs, and modern and contemporary art. The library itself owns many rare titles and artist books, including a renowned Duchamp-related materials collection, many of which are represented in the Duchamp Research Portal that's maintained by the museum and the archives. We are a closed access collection, And the Library and Archives is one department, but this presentation will focus on the library side of the department. Next slide, please. I think it's important to start by sharing the library's overall vision and mission, which is to connect our patrons to our diverse holdings and materials that capture and supplement the museum's object collections, institutional history, and the world of art generally. And we prioritize this largely by placing a strong emphasis on digital technologies to facilitate that access. Next slide, please. Additionally, I think it's important to share the library's main patron base, which maybe is a little bit different than a university demographic or public library. So our main demographic and patron base includes curators, conservators, exhibition staff, educators, board members, provenance department, volunteer guides, and mostly internal museum staff. Externally, many of our requests originate from auction houses, artist estates, and sometimes even criminal investigators who may be researching fraudulent works passed off as works by known artists. It's also important to note that the library has a reading room, which was on the first slide, and that's currently open on weekdays by appointment only. And these are all things that kind of have been considered when we were originally evaluating our future library system discovery interface. Next slide, please. So the decision to migrate library systems definitely predates my hiring on. I think they started initial discussions about 3 years before I started, and then several factors were really contributed to that. The consortium that we were part of was part of a shared library ILS, and they were leaving ALIF, which was the previous ILS. The cost was going to be prohibitive to stay in the existing system on our own. We also had just a vested interest in being an early adopter of an open access linked data library services platform, as well as a library catalog that had an improved UX design, customizable interface, single sign-on, integration options, patron empowerment tools, seamless federated searching and integration, including reshare ILL possibilities, because we are a big borrower in interlibrary loan, and reshare easy borrow is one of the things that was like a non-negotiable when we were looking at migrating. So that was something that we really wanted to utilize some type of integration. And we also wanted to incorporate museum branding in a way that couldn't have been done previously. Next slide, please. And then ultimately, we decided to go with FOLIO Viewfind. And I say we, index data helped a lot with this process. So I started about a month before the migration was to take place. So yes, a lot of the heavy lifting, I think, was by my predecessors, the former director of our library and archives, as well as our former cataloging and metadata services specialist, who did a lot of the preliminary work and looking at the different migration options. And ultimately, we went with FOLIO Viewfind with index data. Next slide, please. So as I said, this was a long-term process that kind of had initial discussions several years in advance, because the consortium was going to move on to a new platform, and it was just not, it was cost prohibitive for us, so we wanted to go out on our own. My first month within the position was spent looking at local cataloging policies and legacy practices, and just the collection generally, to understand how to get all that data efficiently and successfully migrated. Special attention was paid to artist files, auction catalogs, materials with system generated barcodes, bound widths, exhibition catalogs, a local collection of digitized exhibition labels, which we were looking at migrating into our local dams, oversized and folio materials, and then we also have about 10 departmental libraries as well as offsite storage. So these were just a couple of things that were factored in or considered during the migration process. And then there's a couple other metadata things as well. So next slide, please. So these are just a couple of the metadata remediations that we looked at before the migration. So we wanted to make sure that we preserved ALIF only fields, to locally define MARC fields so that we could see that data at some point in the future should we want to look at that. There were also some typos in shelf list numbers, especially in auction catalogs where there were just additional numbers that weren't adding up to an actual date. And as well, there were a number of records that didn't have some kind of system control identifier. So that would be things like OCLC numbers, which we wanted. So I think we determined that that could be done as a holdings reconciliation project in the future. So these are just a couple of examples of the things that we looked at prior to the migration. Next slide, please. And then we migrated, and it was great because we were able to successfully migrate 198,000 bibliographic records and 5,415 patron records, and only 3 loans were not properly transferred over, and we could replicate that in post. Next slide, please. This is the library catalog. One of the advanced search pages incorporates approved museum branding and replicates the format, fonts, and colors used in the library's LibGuides. We customized the advanced search to have an option to search by auction date, which a lot of the auction catalogs, people who are looking for auction catalogs, they search by that. Additionally, we have an advanced search option for acquisition note, credit line, and donor information because we wanted to replicate materials, book plate, acknowledgement lines, because that was something that we had gotten from our committee was very important to see that reflected in the catalog. Next slide, please. So overall, since migrating, we've seen an overall reduction in our operating costs. We've implemented single sign-on with the museum, Entra, Microsoft Entra, and Open Athens, which is how we manage our electronic resources. We also have SSO to reshare EasyBorrow for interlibrary loan integration, which was extremely important for us. We've since sideloaded some collections of e-resources via FTP, but Peter Murray has since developed an e-resource sideloader option for future self-sustaining of e-resource collections, so we're really excited about that. There's been better display and request options for bound with and SAML bound records in the Viewfind Discovery layer. We've been able to implement customizable search facets, some automated notices, which have allowed us to do patron empowerment tools, which was another big component of like what we wanted. To have our patrons be self-sustaining and come to us when they have like actual questions and teach them how to use the tools to be successful. We've also seen an overall increase in the number of page and scan requests, better statistics reporting, and a better infrastructure to facilitate non-returnable interlibrary loans in the future, which is something that we're looking forward to in the future, similar to like what Boston Library Consortium, I think, has. Next slide, please. So since migrating to the new LSP, there have been several recent interdepartmental collaborations, which have ignited conversations about unifying the link between the museum CMS and the library catalog. So the museum CMS is like work session art objects are held. Some departments have materials that are classified as books, and there's been conversation about like, well, why can't that be integrated into your library catalog, like if it's a book? So there are discussions about having it link to each other. That's a conversation that we're interested in pursuing. We don't really have answers. It's a long-term project. There's also preliminary interest from internal stakeholders for just book materials, particularly like things that fit a criteria to also be reflected in the CMS. So having it be a reciprocal type of relationship. Next slide, please. And then the most recent developments, this past June, we got a collection services specialist who has really begun the process of setting up our acquisitions within FOLIO. It's something that we altogether didn't really have or manage within ALIF. So this has the goal of linking this order data to existing serial records and generating predictive patterning in the serials app for future receiving. So this is like an ongoing project. We couldn't do this before we had the staff member in place. So it's been really great to kind of see this moving along and providing like more understanding of our collection. We've also recently implemented MetaDB and the use of reporting app in this past September, so earlier this month. and we're still developing workflows. So Corey's talk is especially timely for us. And then one of the most recent things that we really are loving is in the Ramson's update, the ability to select and print pick slips and request up. As a closed text library, this is like an invaluable tool for us because we have different sub-libraries where we have to request. It takes time to get it because we're not in the same building. We have offsite material, so this allows us to really, not waste paper, essentially, and we can hold on to those things as opposed to like having to scroll through 30-page requests every day and deselect certain ones. So this has been really valuable. So I'm really grateful to the community for really implementing a lot of these features that we use and know and love. And I can't wait to see what the next ones are. Next slide, please. And I think generally, what does the future hold? Now that we've implemented MetaDB and are in the process of setting up acquisitions app, we feel empowered in being able to contextualize and more fully understand their data. We value the ways that FOLIO, ViewFind, Reshare, and now MetaDB have enabled us to train our patrons on the ways in which to navigate and access our holdings. Not only are we able to uphold patron empowerment as a result of our migration, we, the library and cultural worker staff, have been empowered as well by its ability to be customized and tailored to our unique needs as a closed text museum library, and then now being able to gain a clearer picture of our data, its strengths, its weaknesses, and the areas, including the metadata, where we can improve. So generally, we're just very empowered, and we're happy to reciprocally be providing that to our patrons. And next slide. If you have any questions, you can contact me or contact the general library at philomuseum.org. And then our library catalog is there as well.
Okay, great. Thank you all. Thank you, Lauren, for herding us cats. And we are slightly over time. So our contact information is here on the screen. Feel free to get in touch or catch me in the hallways. And thank you for your attention and your time.